Imagine a world where a stolen loaf of bread could cost you your hand, where gossiping could lock an iron muzzle onto your face, where the ultimate authority was not just to take a life but to design a death so horrifying it would echo through a community for generations. Throughout history, societies have faced a fundamental question: how do you maintain order? The answer, time and again, was to create punishments so severe they would deter crime through sheer terror. But these methods were more than just acts of cruelty. They were calculated technologies of control, each one revealing a civilization's deepest fears, values, and its very definition of justice. Today, we are counting down 10 punishments so extreme they didn't just punish individuals. They actively shaped the course of civilization. For each entry, we will break down the raw mechanics of the punishment, explore the societal goal it was designed to achieve, and uncover the unintended legacy it left behind. This is not about shock value. It is about understanding the blueprint of power that still influences us today. At number 10, we have public humiliation. Before the age of mass media, shame was a powerful tool. The most common instruments were the stocks and the pillory. These were wooden frames designed to hold a person in an uncomfortable, exposed position in a public square. The punishment wasn't the confinement itself, but the spectacle. The offender, completely defenseless, would be subjected to ridicule and pelted with rotten food and refuse by the entire community. The goal was deterrence through degradation. By making an example of one person, authorities hoped to compel everyone else to conform. The unintended consequence, however, was the creation of a volatile, mob-driven form of justice where public sentiment could turn a shaming into a fatal event. It was a primitive form of social credit system enforced not by algorithms but by produce. Coming in at number 9 is mutilation. This was the practice of permanently disfiguring an offender as a lifelong, visible reminder of their crime. In many cultures, a thief might have a hand cut off. In ancient Egypt, those guilty of theft could have their noses severed before being exiled to a remote city of outcasts. Other methods included branding with a hot iron, marking a person with the symbol of their city or their crime. The societal goal was twofold: to create a walking warning to others and to physically disable repeat offenders. The legacy of mutilation is the enduring idea that punishment should leave a mark, a concept that evolved into the criminal record, an invisible but equally permanent brand that can follow a person for life. Number 8 on our list is the scold's bridle. This was a punishment almost exclusively reserved for women accused of being gossips, nags, or scolds. The device was an iron muzzle that encased the head, often featuring a bit that pressed down on the tongue to prevent speech. Sometimes the bit was spiked to cause pain if the tongue moved. The wearer would be paraded through town, a public silencing for a perceived public nuisance. The goal was to enforce social hierarchy and control speech, particularly the speech of women who were seen as challenging domestic order. The unintended consequence was the formalization of gender-specific punishments, highlighting how legal systems have historically been used to police the behavior of specific groups. It represents an early, brutal attempt at what we might now call cancellation. At number 7, we encounter flogging and whipping. This is one of the oldest and most universal forms of corporal punishment, involving the repeated striking of a person with a whip, rod, or cat-o'-nine-tails. It was administered publicly, often to the point of drawing blood and causing severe injury. While it was outlawed for women in Britain as early as 1820, it persisted for men in various forms for over a century longer. In the United States, the last official flogging sentence was carried out in the state of Delaware in 1952. The societal goal was to inflict intense, immediate pain as a direct and visceral deterrent. Its legacy is the ongoing debate about corporal punishment, a practice that remains legal in some parts of the world and echoes in discussions about police brutality and the use of force. Number 6 is the gruesome method of boiling alive. As the name implies, this involved immersing the condemned person in a cauldron of boiling water, oil, or even tar. It was used across Europe and Asia for crimes ranging from murder to poison. The goal was to create a punishment that was perceived as exceptionally horrific, even by medieval standards, reserved for offenses that threatened the very fabric of society, like poisoning, which was considered a stealthy and cowardly act. The sheer theatrical cruelty was meant to underscore the absolute power of the state. The unintended legacy of such methods was their role in eventually sparking public revulsion, contributing to the long-term shift away from public, torturous executions. Breaking into our top 5 at number 5 is impalement. This method, infamously associated with Vlad the Impaler, involved driving a sharpened stake through the body. The stake was often oiled and inserted carefully to avoid immediate damage to vital organs, meaning death could take hours or even days as the victim's own weight caused them to slide further down the pole. The goal was not just execution, but psychological warfare. The sight of a forest of impaled victims on the outskirts of a city was a powerful message to enemies and subjects alike. The legacy of impalement is a stark reminder of how punishment can be weaponized as a tool of terror and propaganda, a strategy still employed by authoritarian regimes. Number 4 is the horrific Persian method known as scaphism. The name comes from the Greek word for scooped out. The victim would be placed inside 2 narrow hollowed-out rowboats or tree trunks, one clamped on top of the other with their head, hands, and feet sticking out. They were force-fed milk and honey to induce severe diarrhea, and more honey was slathered on their body to attract insects. The boats would then be left floating on a stagnant pond or laid out in the sun. The condemned person would lie in their own waste, being slowly eaten alive by insects and maggots over a period of days, dying from a combination of dehydration, infection, and septic shock. The goal was to create the most prolonged and agonizing death imaginable, reserved for the most serious crimes like treason. The unintended consequence of such extreme cruelty is that it often becomes the primary thing history remembers about a ruler or empire, overshadowing all other achievements. Our number 3 punishment is the breaking wheel. Also known as the Catherine wheel, this was a popular form of public execution in medieval and early modern Europe. The victim was tied to a large wooden wheel, and a heavy iron bar was used to systematically break the major bones in their body. In some versions, the shattered body was then woven through the spokes of the wheel, which was hoisted atop a pole. Birds and the elements would then finish the job. The goal was a spectacular and symbolic destruction of the body, often for crimes like murder or robbery. The wheel itself symbolized the sun, or the breaking of a life. The legacy of the breaking wheel is its demonstration of punishment as a public art form, a carefully choreographed drama of pain designed to reinforce the absolute power of the state over the individual. At number 2, we have drawing and quartering. This was the ultimate punishment for high treason in England, designed to be the most terrifying spectacle possible. The condemned was dragged to the site, hanged until nearly dead, then disemboweled and castrated. Their entrails were burned before their eyes, and finally, their body was cut into 4 parts. The goal was to symbolically destroy the traitor completely, their life, their lineage, and their body. It was a public ritual to demonstrate the complete annihilation of anyone who threatened the crown. The unintended consequence was that its sheer brutality eventually fueled reform movements as public sensibilities changed and such spectacles were seen as barbaric rather than awe-inspiring. Finally, our number 1 punishment, which had the most profound and lasting impact on civilization, is solitary confinement. Unlike the graphic physical tortures on this list, this is a punishment of the mind. Its origins as a formal penal strategy lie in the early 19th century with the separate system in prisons like Eastern State Penitentiary. The idea was that in complete isolation, a prisoner would be forced to reflect on their crimes and achieve penitence, hence the term penitentiary. The goal was reform through isolation, removing corrupting social influences. But the unintended legacy is what makes it number 1. We now understand that prolonged isolation can cause severe and permanent psychological damage, including anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and cognitive decline. It demonstrates a pivotal shift from punishing the body to punishing the mind. And its DNA is everywhere today. It's in our modern supermax prisons. It's in the social isolation of internet cancel culture. It's in the algorithmic bubbles that cut us off from opposing viewpoints. The silent, isolated cell is the modern equivalent of the iron muzzle or the breaking wheel, a tool of control whose full consequences we are still grappling with. These 10 punishments show a clear evolution. They began as public spectacles focused on the body, designed to terrorize communities into obedience. But over time, as societies modernized, the spectacle became distasteful. Executions moved behind prison walls. The focus shifted from physical agony to psychological correction. But the core purpose remains the same: to enforce order and define the boundaries of acceptable behavior. The next time you hear about a controversial prison sentence or a debate about online shaming, consider the echoes of the past. The tools have changed, but the fundamental calculus of power and control continues. If you can spot the shadow of the breaking wheel in a life without parole sentence, or the scold's bridle in a coordinated social media pylon, then we've done our job. Which of these historical punishments do you see reflected most clearly in our modern world? Share your perspective in the comments below.